Hey guys, this is FP Productions, and as most of you probably know by now, we got another trailer for Breath of the Wild 2 at E3 2021, and it was just a crazy trailer, and I'm still super hyped about it. I mean, I'm recording this just hours after it came out, hopefully uploading it within the next day or two. But what I wanted to do today was just analyze the trailer, not frame by frame necessarily, but just kind of moment by moment, just sharing the things that I noticed and what it might mean for the game, because I've actually noticed quite a few interesting things. I've watched this like 3 times already, and I've noticed some stuff that I think you guys will find interesting. So I'm just going to begin with this first part here. So the very first thing we see is just a shot of Malice, like just straight up Malice. And so that just goes to show it's definitely going to be important to the game. I think we all knew this from the first trailer, but they're like really emphasizing it here. It's the first thing we see. And I still predict that Malice will be somewhere in the title once the game actually gets an official title, because it just seems like it's super important overall. But after a few seconds of this, we get this shot right here of the Malice creeping up Link's arm. And this appears to be at that part early in the game, kind of the same part as the first look trailer from 2019, because Link is still wearing the blue tunic, and you can see the Master Sword strapped on him right there. Hopefully my mouse is showing in the video. But you can see the Master Sword still, so this is clearly that early scene. And the Malice appears to be creeping up his arm. And I'm not sure exactly the full context. You can tell from his expression here, this is clearly painful, clearly unpleasant for him. But I'm not really entirely sure what this means story-wise. It could be that the Malice is trying to take him over, but the Green Hand comes in and saves him. Or it could mean that he actually gets power from the Malice in this game. It's too early to tell. But looking at it now, you can see that it's actually kind of forming fingers, kind of in a hand shape. And I find that to be super interesting. Couple months ago, I actually put out a video where I was theorizing that there were 2 different hands, and I actually found evidence for that in the first trailer, and this almost kind of supports that. But again, it's too early to tell, but those definitely look like fingers kind of forming a hand there, so it could be like a light versus darkness kind of thing happening, the good hand and the bad hand, but it's too early to tell. So after that, we cut back to the Malice, so Link is kind of just spliced in there, so this might be out of chronological order. But the Malice is clearly growing more and more. Seems to be getting stronger in some way, but you know, this whole shot is just so vague. I don't even know exactly what's happening in the background. But then we cut to Ganon right here. So this says quite a bit, actually. So he's clearly, he's moving, he's raising his arms, and then we see the Malice kind of rising up again. So he's clearly, the force at play here. He's clearly controlling the Malice, and he's not just a dead, mummified corpse. He's actually able to move still and is controlling the Malice, and I just think that's a really important detail for sure. After that, we cut back to this again. The Malice just continuing to grow more and more. So it's obviously going to be super important, but then we get this. So this I want to talk about. So in my last video, actually just last week, I predicted that Zelda was going to be separated from Link and that they would not reunite till the end of the game. And just from this shot right here, that actually seems to be the case. At the very least, she's definitely separated from Link and is stuck underground, which, not to pat myself on the back, but that's like exactly what I said was going to happen in my video last week, so I feel pretty good about that, having called that one. But back to the analysis. we see Zelda going deep underground. Like, clearly she's not, rising up to the sky or anything. She's going underground even further, which is really interesting because the very next thing that we see, it's almost like a direct contrast. So we kind of fade to the darkness as Zelda falls down, but then we open to this bright light. I'll skip ahead to it. So we immediately then open up to this bright light and we're in the sky. So to me, this is like a contrast. This is like Zelda has fallen down here into the darkness, and Link has done the opposite. He's risen up and he's in this bright open sky. So before I get into the sky part though, because that's that's honestly a huge deal, I want to just briefly comment on Zelda again. So the fact that she's down there, that's going to be super important. There's no way the plot is just going to ignore that this happens to Zelda. So I don't think we're done with the underground. I know the sky was the big thing in this trailer, but I feel like there's going to be one more big announcement, one more big mind-blowing thing, and that's going to be underground sections. And I'm starting to really actually think Zelda will be playable, because it wouldn't make sense, if Link is clearly going up into the sky and Zelda's down here, it wouldn't make sense to just not have the underground. So I kind of feel like we're going to get sky and underground sections, and I think Zelda will I think there's a pretty good chance she's going to be playable in the underground, but it's still too early to tell. But I don't think we're done with the underground yet, is my main takeaway from this, because there's no way, Zelda being down there is super important. But then we get the sky. So right away, this right here, the way Link is falling, this is exactly his animation in Skyward Sword when Link descends to the surface in that game. Hopefully I'm able to put it on the screen while I'm editing so you guys can see a comparison, but this is literally his Skyward Sword descending to the ground animation. And with Skyward Sword HD coming out pretty soon, it's pretty obvious to me that there's maybe not a direct story connection here, but there's definitely a connection with the whole theme of being in the sky. And I think that Skyward Sword was probably a pretty big influence in this. But we can also see a lot of other really interesting things in this shot. So Link's hair has been let loose, kind of just, he's not wearing the ponytail, it's kind of just flowing. And we see at other points in the trailer, it specifically looks like that when he's wearing this armor set. So I kind of think that this hairstyle is part of that armor set, and not just something you'll be able to do at any point. I think it's part of this. Kind of like how in the first Breath of the Wild, his hair would flow super long when you wore the Guardian, or what was it, the Ancient armor set. But also kind of important to note, it does strongly resemble the hero we see on the tapestry when Impa's telling the story of 10,000 years ago in the original Breath of the Wild. So again, there could be some kind of connection there, but it's just too early to tell. Now, as I'm looking closely, it looks like he has some kind of markings on his skin, and something's definitely going on with his hand. From here, it almost looks like it's blackened and kind of dead. But it could also just be that he's wearing some kind of gauntlet or glove. But something's going on with his hand, and that has to be markings, I think. It doesn't look like shadows. I think those are markings on his skin. So, I don't know exactly what this is supposed to entail, but again, that could be body paint that goes with this armor set, or it could be sign of some kind of corruption, or, from the malice, or who knows what. But there's a lot just right here. But then, again, we're in the sky, but what's really interesting about this, right off the bat I noticed, okay, paraglider's back, which is great. I think we all like the paraglider. But it's interesting that at first Link was kind of just free falling, and now he's actually gliding forward with the paraglider. And it kind of doesn't look like he's descending. It looks like he's actually going just straight forward. It could just be the camera angle. But I'm almost wondering if this is a special upgrade of the paraglider. And even the design on it up here looks different from the one we see in the first game, unless I'm remembering wrong. And it also has these kind of streamers coming out of it now, which I think is also a new thing. So I almost am thinking this is an upgraded paraglider that's gives him better traversal through the sky, because there's like huge gaps between some of these islands here. This does look like some kind of upgraded paraglider, I think, from the first game. And he has a shield that is different. This was not seen in Breath of the Wild. And that looks like the Sheikah eye on it, but stylized differently. So instead of having the one kind of teardrop thing coming down, it has this whole emblem. I don't know what you would call this shape, but it has this whole emblem beneath it. But that does appear to be the Sheikah eye. So there's obviously some new shield, some new equipment types in this game, part of new sets that we didn't see in the first one. So that's really exciting. And then after that, we get this nice shot of the sky. Again, only time will tell exactly what's going to go on these islands. I don't think we can really tell that much just from this shot. But we do see this. So this is just a really beautiful, shot. I love the colors in this. It looks kind of autumn-like. I don't know if that's what every single island is gonna look like, or if it's just this one, but that looks really good. Link is wearing the same armor set with the same shield as before. We can also see like a bird right here, so it looks like there's still gonna be wildlife in the sky, just like there was a bunch of wildlife in the ground in Breath of the Wild. So that's good to know. There's still gonna be that aspect of having actual wildlife throughout the setting of Hyrule and above. And then we see another bird taking off, so it seems like it's the same kind of emphasis on having a realistic world as in the first game, which makes sense because it's the same engine. So I'll just move on to the next part here. So okay, this is fascinating. So this is a brand new enemy type, seemingly. Some kind of automaton. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but there's clearly some kind of mechanical type of enemy that we see right here that was not in Breath of the Wild at all. Now, the impression I'm getting just from this eye and just knowing what Zelda tends to do, this could just be like a different version of the Guardian, just like a heavily stylized version that you find in the sky. Or I could even see this being a Beamos, like earlier Zelda games would have a Beamos enemy that has one eye kind of like this, and if that's the case, it'll probably just shoot lasers at you. Although, to be fair, we technically don't even know if this is an enemy. This could be something that Link can use, like some kind of turret or something. There's a lot of different possibilities. One thing to note for sure is this symbol in the middle of it. I don't think we've seen that symbol anywhere in the series before, so I don't know what it signifies, but it could mean that there's like a new tribe or race up here that we haven't even met before. And heck, maybe this thing is part of that race, who knows? There's a ton of possibilities. This kind of resembles the Sheikah eye, but I'm not entirely sure if that's what it's supposed to be. But this right here, this logo, and kind of on its belt, if you want to call it that, the middle, I think we should be paying attention to that, because I feel like that's going to be either a new race or a new branch of the Sheikah tribe or something. So then, this is really fascinating right here. So I'll just move forward a little bit. So this is an enemy camp on top of a stone talus, which is insane. That's honestly really cool, and I don't even know how you would take this thing down, because how do you even climb up there with all this stuff blocking the way up? So this looks pretty challenging too. I mean, I'm sure you can just easily take down the red bokoblins with your bow, but I'm sure as the game goes on, they'll scale up and get tougher. Imagine if it was 3 gold bokoblins up here, that would just be insane. So that's gonna be, this is just a really cool concept, an enemy camp on top of an enemy. I love it. But there's actually a lot more that we get from this. So first of all, the Bokoblins have horns, like actual horns on top of them now, which they did not have in the first game. They were just kind of bald, but they actually have horns now, which is interesting because even in the original, you could collect Bokoblin horns, even though they didn't physically have them. But now, I don't know if this is just like a new, like if they've just redesigned this enemy, or if this is a brand new type. I don't know if the horn will have a new ability, but that to me is very interesting, just knowing that, hey, the Bokoblins have horns now for some reason. Also, we can see Link in his Champion's Tunic, the revised version from the first look trailer with all the extra like breastplate and stuff like that. And the, what is it called? The Traveler's Shield from the first Breath of the Wild. So we see that some classic equipment like the Hylian pants, the basic bow and shield, a lot of that is returning from the first Breath of the Wild, which I actually kind of like. I appreciate that some of the old stuff is still going to be here, something familiar. But also, a super obvious one, this is Hyrule. This is like the regular Hyrule that we've explored in the first game. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a shrine or is that just a rock that my cursor is moving over? That might just be a rock, but it kind of looks like a shrine. Either way, this is definitely like just the original Hyrule. So clearly that's still here and we're still going to be able to explore it, but we're already getting our first look at how it's changed with this this whole new enemy camp going on. Not to linger too much longer on this little clip here, but it does kind of worry me that the one like enemy they're emphasizing here is just a new version of one we saw in Breath of the Wild. You know, like as cool as it is, I hope we actually get some new enemy types too, and not just upgraded versions of ones from the first game. But anyway, moving on. So this is super important. So we do clearly see like 100% Link's hand gets powered up by this glowy green glove, which clearly is able to, so okay, you can see that like the actual bracelet, maybe I shouldn't call it a glove, it's more of like a gauntlet, I guess. We'll call it a gauntlet. So this gauntlet here is clearly channeling the green energy, and so I think that's where the power is coming from. I don't think there's like an actual, I'm kind of starting to think there's not an actual green hand. It's more just that this gauntlet is able to channel energy and you wear it on your hand, and Link's hand is turning green. Of course, that wouldn't explain the disembodied hand from the first look trailer, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but clearly Link is wearing a gauntlet that's able to channel this green energy, and that's definitely a power source here. And again, this makes me think like, you know, earlier we saw the Malice taking over his hand, but I don't see how this and that could both be the case at once. So either these are two different points in the story, or you know, this thing comes in and saves him from the Malice, but this is clearly like the main power source, I think. So this part is very, very interesting. So at first, when I saw this just during the live presentation, I was like, oh cool, the Sheikah Slate is back. And we have stasis, great. But if you look closely, there's no Sheikah Slate. Link is just doing this from his hand. So again, this is presumably a result of the gauntlet, I would assume, although it doesn't look like he's wearing it here. It looks like he's just wearing his normal one, so that's kind of confusing. But he clearly has some kind of stasis-related ability without having the actual Sheikah Slate. So I have no idea why that's the case, but he's able to freeze this object, and then this sort of grayscale, I don't know what you would call it, but just this grayscale effect goes over the screen. Gosh, getting my tongue all twisted up, but the screen goes all gray, basically, and we see kind of a yellow chain coming out of this metal ball, and then it kind of just goes backwards. So it seems to be retracing its path back up the mountain. I think that's what's happening here. So clearly we now have some kind of like a rewind ability. So in the original Breath of the Wild, stasis would freeze objects in time, but this is clearly like reversing its path through time, and you can take out enemies in this way, and I think that's pretty dang cool. Also, I'm pretty sure this is somewhere in the Elden region, just based on the rocky kind of terrain and the colors. I think this is Elden. I could be wrong, but you know, the main takeaway here, we already know we're going back to Hyrule at some point, so the main takeaway is just this new like reverse time through stasis kind of thing, and there's no Sheikah Slate for it that we can see. So this right here, this is fascinating, because right away, this is a new, completely new enemy, completely new thing. I think there's like a lot of questions like that we can ask just from right here. So like, what is this thing? So clearly we're getting some kind of new enemy, which is great. But is this a dungeon? Is this a mini boss inside of a dungeon? Is this the actual boss battle of the dungeon? You know, we're clearly in some kind of stone chamber, and we have this brand new enemy presented, I guess. Link's going against this brand new enemy. So, you know, this just raises a lot of questions. I surprisingly haven't seen anyone talk about this yet. Granted, the trailer came out like, I don't know, 5 hours ago or something. But we see a brand new enemy in presumably a brand new location. So that's a really good sign. And I'm personally hoping that this is a dungeon and this is some kind of mini boss. But the part that everyone is talking about is the flamethrower on Link's hand. So that's also a brand new thing. So we can see, okay, so this thing, as Link burns it, it extends out, and Link kind of backflips away from it. So this part that we saw earlier, this looks like it's actually just the tongue of like this whole monster here, which is super creepy. And then it appears to be weak to fire. But then as Link finishes his backflip, so we get a better look at kind of the flamethrower thing here. And we can see it's on his left hand, whereas earlier when he did the stasis thing, that was his right hand. So that makes me wonder if this is maybe just a new item and not actually tied to the whole hand thing. But I'm pretty sure he ends up switching to a different one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But either way, we clearly see this this new flamethrower type of item, which is really cool, and a new monster, and hopefully a dungeon here. But I really have no idea. Could be anything. So okay, here's another really big, fascinating thing though. So we see this water rise up and, you know, into a droplet, but I don't think this is normal water. I mean, obviously, but it's more, again, that same green energy that we saw earlier with the gauntlet and that we've seen in the first look trailer. So this is, again, clearly a source of power that Link will be using a lot throughout the game. And in this case, so like what's really confusing, it starts out looking like water. So it's clearly like it's a little puddle and a little hole in the ground. But then it rises up and Link is able to merge through the underside of this wall here and then climb up on the other side. So this raises a lot of questions. Like, this is obviously a new ability, which is really cool. But I'm wondering, can we only use it in these little puddle-like areas? You know, these little shallow holes? And does there have to be water in it originally? So, like, does it take over the water and then, like, rise up with it? Or does it just kind of create the water, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like, does there have to be water around for us to use this? And then second, is this ability also able to go through walls horizontally, or can we only go vertically up through walls? Because that would be a huge game changer if we could just go through any solid surface in the entire game, and I kind of feel like that would be a bit too broken actually, so I really hope they put some kind of limit on it. But those are just the questions I have. But then we get this shot of more sky islands, but if you look closely, this right here, this is actually the Tabantha region in Breath of the Wild, and if you look closely right down here, you can see, I think it's called like the Ceres Scablands or something in the original game. I'd have to look at the map, I don't know. But you can see that weird area where it has like those giant mushroom looking things, and there's like the swamp, and that one like thunder related shrine where it's like always storming until you unlock the shrine. So clearly these islands are literally floating right above the Hyrule we know and love from the original, because they're like right over this familiar area. But it just makes me wonder, you know, where were they in the first game? And why are they here now? So there's a lot of implications in that. You know, I would say either they must have like risen up from the surface, so which would mean that there's going to be a lot of like blank, you know, empty like canyons and stuff in the overworld now, or these islands got here some other way that has yet to be revealed. But I just think it's really interesting that, you know, earlier in the trailer it looked like we were kind of just over the open sky with like nothing below, but we can clearly see that like the actual normal Hyrule is down here still. But also, before I move on, you know, this is like an entire, like this looks like some kind of temple or like some kind of building, obviously. So again, you know, this is some kind of like weird looking torch. It almost looks like you would like an electric one like you would see in the shrines sometimes in Breath of the Wild. So is this a dungeon? Is this a mini dungeon? You know, what exactly is this building is my question. And again, as you as this pans out more, you can see again how this is definitely the Tabantha region. You can see more of those like mushroom looking things. And then towards the very end of the trailer, we get this shot of the castle rising, which we did briefly see in the first trailer, but now we can see kind of more detail where there's like literally malice just seeping up from under the castle. And the castle itself, or at least the rock that it was built on, is just falling apart. Then we see it from a distance in the sunset. So this is the very end of the trailer before the release date, which is another thing I want to talk about. But what's interesting at this part specifically, let me just unmute the audio real quick. So what's interesting here is if you listen, you can hear the first 3 notes of Zelda's lullaby. You can hear the first 3 notes of Zelda's lullaby played on a very kind of like Asian sounding instrument. I don't know exactly what instrument. I would assume some kind of flute or something, but it has the same sort of sound as like the music associated with Kakariko Village in the first Breath of the Wild, which makes me wonder, you know, why did they choose that specific instrument? So in my opinion, this kind of hints at Sheikah involvement, because again, with the style of instrument that they used, that, you know, it just has that sound that, like the melody of Kakariko Village in Breath of the Wild, for example, uses. So to me, that kind of hints at some kind of Sheikah involvement. And then, at the very end here, we get the 2022 tentative release date. So for me, that's kind of I wouldn't say a red flag exactly, but it kind of sets a very interesting pattern that I hope does not become the new norm here, because Breath of the Wild originally released in 2017. So, and we have not had any mainline Zelda games. Like, we've had remakes like 1 or 2 remakes, but we have not had any new mainline Zelda games since Breath of the Wild. So it will have been 5 years with, between mainline Zelda releases, which is almost unheard of. Now you might be thinking, oh, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword were 5 years apart. Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild were like 5.5 years apart. But we usually get a couple handheld releases in between. And so even though a handheld release, like, for example, between Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, we got Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. Even though those aren't like the biggest and best Zelda games to most people, they're still mainline, canon, full-length Zelda games that we got to hold us over. But in this case, it will have been 5 entire years between mainline Zelda releases, with like literally, just spin-offs and remakes in between. And I'm expecting this to be pushed back even further, because usually when they just give like the year, like the date, usually when they just give the year and not like the full date, it ends up being delayed. This happened with Skyward Sword, this happened with Breath of the Wild. So I could even see it being more like 6 entire years between mainline Zelda releases, which does concern me, and I hope that doesn't become the new norm. But we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully, I'm sure this will be worth the wait because it already looks amazing. But that's about all I've got. So I know this was kind of just rambling a little bit, kind of just me thinking aloud. But I hope you guys got something new from this. Maybe I was able to point out a few new details. And I really just wanted to get this out because I'm just so excited. I'm so hyped that we finally got a trailer at all, and I was just really eager to share my first observations with you guys. So let me know what you guys noticed. Let me know your own theories and thoughts and speculation in the comments. And here's hoping that we get more news soon.